La séance débute. La séance débute. Bienvenue.
I declare the meeting open. I'd like to salute the return of Mr. Dalton at the Official Languages Committee, the best committee on Parliament Hill. And a newcomer, Mr. Bevries. You'll see this is a great committee. So, I declare the committee open. Welcome to meeting number 35 of the Standing Committee on Official Languages of the House of Commons. Pursuant to the decree of May 13, 2022, the committee resumes its examination of Bill C-13, an act to amend the Official Languages Act and amending other acts. This is a hybrid meeting, so pursuant to the order of the House of June 23, 2022, members can participate in person or through Zoom. To guarantee the smooth running of the meeting, I'd like to give a few tips to the witnesses and members. Please wait to be given the floor before speaking. If you're here by video conference, please click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone. Please be in mute when you're not speaking. If you need interpretation on Zoom, you have the choice between floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the headset and choose the desired channel. All remarks by members and witnesses must be addressed to the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For those on Zoom, please use the hands up function. The committee clerk and I will do our best to maintain speaking order, and we thank you for your patience and your understanding in this regard. Pursuant to our routine motion, I inform the committee that all witnesses have done the sound tests before the meeting. I'd like to welcome our witnesses for the first hour, the first panel. From Impératif Français, we have the President, Jean-Paul Perrault, Treasurer, Edith Gendron, and Administration and Development Agent, Femi Abigail Winsou. In addition, virtually, for the first panel, we have the Réseau de développement économique et d'employabilité du Canada, represented by Jean-François Parent. So each witness will have 5 minutes for their opening statements. Members are used to me. I'm very strict with time because it allows for far more questions. So we'll start with 5 minutes for Impératif Français. I don't know if they're sharing the time during the question period. Okay, so you have the floor for 5 minutes, Impératif Français. Mr. Chairman, dear members of the Standing Committee on Official Languages, it's with great pleasure that we accepted your invitation. Worldwide cultural diversity is on the defensive right now. The concept of nations is weakened increasingly. National languages and international languages are pushed into a corner by the Americanization of cultural preferences. We are in a debate that transcends that of Quebec and Canada, or French Canada, and Canada as a whole. And today, we chose a more global approach than strictly Bill C-13, because I'm sure you'll agree that Bill C-13 cannot solve the whole problem of inferiorization of French, the language, the culture, the French-Canadian identity, the Quebec identity. Much more is needed than a simple bill like C-13, in which it would be necessary to rethink the vision and the approach. First of all, we'd like to raise different points here. When we're talking about the French language, please understand that we're going beyond a partisan discourse here. I'm addressing you here. We mustn't simply block ourselves in the visions of our political parties and think that that's all you have to promote. We have to be beyond partisanship here and understand the situation so that each political party can develop an approach to solve the problem. If we go beyond this political discourse, we have a few comments to make. The non-recognition or weak recognition of cultural and linguistic asymmetry in Canada, where the federal government, in its own way, imposes its vision of bilingualism and multiculturalism on Quebec, which, for its part, attempts to protect and promote its own identity on its territory, be that language, culture, or what have you, in order to make it the only official language, the only common language on the Quebec territory, of course. Inequality is also engendered by the symmetrical vision of the status of French and English. The recognition of status poses no problem. What we need, however, is when you realize that the French official language is in a minority situation and is decreasing, you will understand that we must abandon this symmetrical approach, not when it comes to the status of equality, but in the resources put at the disposal of Quebec and the Francophonie outside Quebec. The insufficiency of federal resources means that if French is on the slide, as we see, we end up in this situation in great part because of the federal vision. The funds granted to the production and distribution, dissemination, and creation of a French culture which is strong must be increased. This will promote and disseminate the French language. The over-financing of English institutions in Quebec, given the minority population of Anglophones historically, even mother tongue English, which is 7.6%, this contributes to the underfunding of French language institutions. We're talking about prestige, dissemination. That brings about underfinancing of French universities, since the amount available goes to English institutions. Oh, I have 30 seconds. Can you tell me how come everyone recognizes throughout Canada, be it Quebec and French Canada, everyone recognizes that French is on the downturn? I'm not asking you for an answer, but please explain why the organizations that work for the promotion and advancement of the majority French... Thank you, Mr. Perrault. I'm sorry. During the question period, Mr. Perrault, during the question period, you developed this further. No, I'm sorry. I'm now giving the floor to the RD, Mr. Jean-François Parent. You now have 5 minutes as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, dear members of the committee, distinguished guests, witnesses, and members of the audience. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to express ourselves on Bill C-13. With over 430,000 Francophone enterprises across the country, 19.5% of the GDP, generating $130 billion in economic spin-offs, the Canadian Economic Francophonie wants to be part of the economic relaunch and the modernization of legislation that guides the development of official languages communities throughout the country. Expectations are very high among Francophone and Acadian minority situation communities. In a TACT survey, 77% of respondents say that the federal government should do more for the economic development of Francophone communities in minority situations. The expectations of Francophones are very high when it comes to our elected officials. While the restrictions and repercussions of the pandemic are barely starting to recede throughout Canada, and the economic recovery is starting, we have a labor shortage that is unprecedented, and our organization, RDEE Canada, wants to express its extreme interest in C-13 and its importance for the development of Francophone communities across the country. On March 1st, the Government of Canada officially tabled the bill that seeks to amend the Official Languages Act and certain related acts, as you undoubtedly know, and create a law on the use of French within private companies under federal jurisdiction. This provides new rights for Francophone employees and consumers in areas with strong Francophone presence. This means the right to work in French and receive communications and services in French in companies under federal jurisdiction. At RDE Canada, we wonder this: why weren't these provisions included in the legislation for the past several years? The new legislation would apply to banks, transportation, railways, interprovincial and international trucking, as well as airlines, maritime transport, telephones, and cable. These companies are important players in our economy, national economy, and affect millions of Canadians every year. At least one, or at least the vast majority of these companies, regularly do business with the 2.7 million Francophones in minority communities, according to the 2021 census. We have seen many debates in the media and in our communities on the importance of the new bill. We at RDE Canada think this is of capital importance because this is a bill that has the ability to have a leverage effect in taking into account the Francophone dimension in the development of companies on Canadian soil. The language issue has always been relegated to second rank when it comes to business decisions. We want to advocate for a new approach where French has a real equal status with English from coast to coast to coast. In an article in L'Actualité on June 9th, it says, C-13 will generate costs of $240 million for companies in order to have bilingual supervisors, according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer. We're talking about costs here, but in our vision, this is an erroneous logic. We should be talking about investments, a strong investment in the ability of companies to respond adequately to the needs of employees, the labor force, and official language community minorities, which private companies can't do right now. We have to have solid bases where future generations can prosper, as well as their communities. If we don't adequately take into consideration the linguistic dimension, as well as economic and social dimensions in the equation, we will probably see further decline of French in Canada. In less than 30 seconds, Mr. Parent, please. Thank you. I'll summarize. In closing, we don't want to see the folklorization of French in the medium term. We want to see the French fact become a major engine for economic development in the country. That was the point of our national summit last September. Thank you very much, Mr. Parent. You can develop this further during the question period. So, first round of questions, 6 minutes once again. We want everyone to have time for their questions, so we'll start with the first Deputy Chairman, Joël Godin. You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the witnesses for participating in this exercise. You help us be better, as I often say, so thank you for being there. My first question is for Impératif Français. Mr. Perrault, that's your name, correct? In your presentation, your opening statement, you said there was overfinancing of English language education in Quebec. You said it was 30%. Could you explain where that money comes from? Yes. This is private and public funding, but nevertheless, it's 30%. And these are documented figures. The English mother tongue population is 7.6%. No, I'm sorry. I only have 6 minutes. That's why I want to do this very fast, and I have questions for the other witness. So when it comes to that 30%, you said it was the private and public sectors. But if it's the public sector, is it provincial or federal? Because education is under provincial jurisdiction. So that public money, does it come mostly from the federal or provincial government? Well, that's important. But regardless, when the total is 30% for, I'm not talking historically, but the people with the English mother tongue is 7%. When the Constitution was adopted, it was for the minority at the time. So everything that was added is not subject to this same vision, and in our opinion, should be integrated into the French language system. 30% is too much. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Obligation peut-être de faire des représentations au niveau du gouvernement du Québec à ce niveau-là. Maintenant, oui, il faut peut-être réajuster au niveau fédéral, mais le fédéral n'a pas apporté l'odieux de l'ensemble du 30 %.
Un instant, M. Godin, j'arrête l'horloge. Un instant. On me dit qu'il y a quelque chose avec la traduction, la technique, je ne suis pas certain. Vous êtes à 2 minutes 5 secondes, M. Godin. Non, vous êtes à 2 minutes 5 secondes. Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
This is interpretation. We may resume. The interpreter apologizes. You're at 2 minutes, 5 seconds. Thank you. So with the RDEE witness, I understand the process. You've explained that in the past certain things were done incorrectly. We can't change that. We can just act on the future. A question for you, Mr. Parent. What are the 3 priorities, in your opinion, that we should find in C13? Excellent question. What's of interest to us for labor is a very specific trajectory for immigration in areas where there are Francophone minorities. FCFA agrees with this. This would solve the issue of Francophonie in minority situations. Second, the use of French in federally regulated private businesses. The third element is maybe a more precise question. What does an official languages minority really represent? This is something that is rather vague, and we might need to specify it. And it would help with regards to research done on businesses that are in minority contexts. A more precise definition would allow us to go ahead on different studies, such as those conducted by Statistics Canada. So a business in Regina, an airport, which according to C13 has to conform to bilingualism. First, there is a labor shortage, and second, there is an issue with accessibility to Francophones. This airport has to offer services bilingually. There needs to be parity. This business does not have the resources after having made calls, and nobody is answering. Nobody wants to speak, is coming to... no workers have responded in order to work in French. So what should this airport do? Is there nothing to do? Can we not develop programs that would allow people to learn French as a second language? Some businesses do wish to have full representation of both languages. If that pool doesn't exist, then you can develop those skills and learn the second language in-house. There are many different solutions. You spoke about immigration, Francophone immigration. The government, in my opinion, is not treating applicants equally. So the wait for Francophone immigrants is 3 times higher. How would you solve that with regards to economic development and how to protect the French language? 20 seconds. You have to develop a specific project for economic immigrants that have skills in this very specific labor context. Thank you. Second question, Mr. Francis Drouin, 6 minutes. Thank you. And thank you to our witnesses who are here both virtually and in person. Impératif Français. And I'd just like to let everybody know that Mr. Perrault has been my professor 15 years ago. He taught statistics, and even at Cité Collégiale, Mr. Perrault was strict about French in our classrooms. He insisted that everybody speak French. So thank you very much. See the result? I'm sorry about that. You mentioned that C13 is a tool, but that it won't defend the Francophonie. And I think it's the same with C93. It's a tool, but it won't do enough. Many tools must be used and implemented. I have noticed that speaking French is a choice, but it's also a choice internationally. We know that there are Francophones, but we're not a majority internationally either. And we are very lucky with certain members of the committee to speak in French with other parliamentarians. But that we do acknowledge that that is a choice that we have to make. Here's my question. Because you are involved with the protection of French, a lot of youth these days spend a lot of times on their phones where linguistic barriers do not exist. In your opinion, how can we make sure that French and French content be available in a sea of English content? I'm not blaming Anglophones. I'm just saying that I'm seeing that the digital world is mostly Anglophone. And when we talk about research, scientific research, there is not enough in French. This is both in Quebec, but also internationally. So in your opinion, what do you think we should do? And can C13 help us? The reason we are here is because we have to invent, think of, and reflect on programs, on how to restructure things, and not just so that we can adopt a defensive position. I think that the Canadian Francophonie and Quebec are worth a lot more than just being on the defensive. What we need to implement is something that allows French and everything that comes with it, culture, education, so on, to flourish and progress. You're talking about an overconsumption of English in social media. So let's give this some thought, because that's partly why we're here. It's not just for the bill. What can the federal government do? We can ask the same questions municipally and to the Anglophone governments of Anglophone provinces. What can they do in order to increase the presence of English on the internet? I'm sure that there would be ways to do that, not just in French. So if people want to, they will develop the means to do that. So presence in universities, in cégeps, in high schools, funding programs for creating electronic or virtual content on social media and on the internet. Once the issue is identified, you don't have to use it in order to push down the English or anything like that, but it's really to see what should we do. You have just identified a very serious problem. Indeed, youth probably consume English media far too much. Thank you very much. That's a question for the exam. Of course, I know Rédé in Ontario as well. There's another organization I'm aware of. C13 is central to your struggles. Is there something with regards to Francophone immigration in C13? Or are you satisfied with the current clauses? I think that all bills could be improved. Right now, we really want we are really pushing for a very specific trajectory for Francophone immigrants in minority situations. This is something that we see from other organizations too. This is partially mentioned in the text, but it would be interesting to have what this trajectory would entail. Thank you. Mr. Mario Beaulieu, second vice chair. Thank you very much, and thank you to our witnesses. I'm just going to follow up on what Mr. Godin was saying. The federal government for 2017 gave more than 35% of their funding to Anglophone universities. I know you didn't finish your presentation. Is there anything important that you still want to bring up? You spoke about airports earlier. This is the international image of Canada. What is the international image of Canada? If that's what it is, then we know that it's the image of an Anglophone country. Let's be real. Find French in any Canadian embassy or consulate. The image of Canada as a Francophone country does not exist. I'll give you an example that is visually very striking. Think of the impact on immigration. If embassies and consulates, Canadian ones, were spreading the idea of an Anglophone country, I don't think that it would interest Francophone immigration, because the images that they will see is that Canada is an Anglophone country. I'll give you an example. I just came back from a country that I was vacationing in the south. I arrived in Ottawa, in Ottawa, in Ontario, at the airport, like any other traveler, an immigrant, a foreigner. I look at all of the kiosks and it says English agent. And there are 2 kiosks that say bilingual agent. Well, I understood that there were 2 languages in Canada, French and bilingual. We have 90% of Anglophones in Canada are unilingual, and in Quebec, with that French is bilingual. This is what the Anglosphere wants, because it allows them to pack their universities, their CEGEPs, through the anglicization of citizens, through media and so on. So the Canadian model is institutional bilingualism, and that's what's imposed in Quebec through the Official Languages Act. But the Quebec model is to make French the common language on the Quebec territory. So Canadian services claim to want to improve bilingual services. What do you think of that? Well, if you look at North America and you look at Canada, the equality of status is very good for French, but the inequality of the programs, because when you level them, it means that the minority official language will be disfavored. Equality is measured by the availability of resources, by the creation, the dissemination, and production of content. And that's, well, when the federal government chooses to fund in Quebec and pay close attention, French is the minority language in Canada. This is the language that is declining. It's the one that is backed up into a corner. It's the one that we are tearing away and apart. In Hull, at the CCN in Gatineau, they had to enforce French. They had to enforce a certain signage, and they actually took off because of they took off the French. Of course, they took off the English too, but they also took off the French in Quebec. This was imposed by the what we should call the federal capital. For Quebecer, Quebec is the capital. Ottawa is the federal capital for Canadians. In agreement, I agree with you. One last thing. I agree that many different researchers are doing different things, but the Minister of Languages in Quebec says that in order to ensure the future of French and ensure the demographic weight of Francophones, we would need 90% of transfers, of linguistic transfers towards French. But the federal government bases itself on the official language of the country, and that is 30% of immigrants. So essentially, the federal government is trying to make French a minority language in Quebec. So from Manitoba, we have our next colleague for 6 minutes, Ms. Nikki Ashton. Thank you to all of our witnesses. Here's my question for Mr. Perrault and Mr. Parent. We analyzed the Department of Immigration's numbers. The 10 main countries of immigration from which there is immigration provide 61% of immigrants to Canada, and most of them have only one of the has English as official language. None of them have French as an official language. We're starting to see that the federal government's policy is failing. What do these numbers tell you about the efforts taken by the federal government in order to attract Francophones to Canada? Does Mr. Parent want to answer? Sure. You mentioned something very interesting. You mentioned consular presence in these countries. In Africa, sadly, Canada's presence is not proportional to the interest that it represents for the Francophonie. And some of the initiatives by commercial delegates and so on are minimal if you compare them to the pool of Francophones that should be coming into Canada, and they are not coming to Canada. I participated in a consultation for Global Affairs a few days ago, and for consulates, embassies, and so on, and Francophone programming, the average cost is about $2,000, which is very low. There is a lot of inequality with regards to the place of French internationally, and we do need to recalibrate things. Mr. Perrault, anything to add? Yes.
Compétence exclusive sur l'immigration.
Yes, I think that Quebec wants control over immigration, a notion that I respect, because no nation that respects itself can accept that somebody else dictates to it on this matter. I'm talking about the concept of nation here. So since immigration is very important for the future of a nation, as well as all those who come to add to our nation through immigration, that whole sector of immigration should come under Quebec jurisdiction. With regard to what Canada does with its Francophone minority outside Quebec, I dare hope, that if there's an equal partnership, English Canada would open the door to stronger Francophone immigration. But you know, madam, when you say that the government of Canada, it's not surprising that we get so many Anglophones through immigration. The government multiplies this worldwide. If Canada was Francophone, do you think that these external links would be greater with all of Francophonie worldwide? Of course. But since Canada is defined by English and disseminates English with a little smidgen of French, immigrants who want to come to a country where comfort is quite high, you will understand that these are Anglophones who come here. What harms French Canada and Quebec is that 50% of allophone immigrants who opt for another language opt for English in Quebec. That doesn't work. It should be 90% French. If you're talking about a decline, immigration is central to this. Education is central to this. But education doesn't come under federal jurisdiction. Well, I'm sorry, I just interrupt you, because that's my next question, education. And that would be for Mr. Parent, but I thank you for the points you've raised, Mr. Perrault. Mr. Parent, the ACUFC, the RDEE, recently published reports about the need for workers in the Francophone and Acadian communities. There is a labor shortage in many sectors, and that shortage is threatening the vitality of Francophone communities. My question for you is, do we have enough staff to teach French to those who are entitled to it or who want to learn French? Is there demand abroad for Francophone teachers to come to Canada to work in our school system? Well, at the outset, the answer is no. There's not enough staff to meet the demand. That is something that has been shared universally in our report. All regions of Canada have labour shortages in 9 sectors, including education, that we examined in our study. Having said that, strong demand internationally. There's the recognition of credentials, too, which unfortunately is something that requires a lot of work to do regarding the labor shortage and the way people are integrated. Thank you, Mr. Parent. You can develop this again later. That's the end of the first round of question. The second one, we start with Mr. Bredvis. You have 5 minutes. It's a great pleasure to be here today. And as I already said, British Columbia is well represented today, the northern part anyway. I was asked at the beginning of my country is from the Netherlands, and vis in Dutch means fish, not screw like it does in French. So, Mr. Perrault, I've listened to your passionate speech today, your will to protect the French language, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my post-secondary situation. I have a son who's 6. He wants to learn French. He went into an educational lottery in BC to get a spot in a Francophone school. When he got there this year, there was no teacher who could speak French. In BC, there are many parents who want their children to be educated in the second official language of this country, but we cannot right now provide this constitutional right to my son, and thousands of other children in BC don't have this opportunity to express themselves in both official languages. How can we change that situation? Is it a question of transfers by the federal government? Offering incentives or something like that to get more teachers and address the problem of the labor shortage? Well, at the speed with which these provinces assimilate Francophones, there's no surprise that there's a lack of teachers when it comes to teaching French. That's true in Quebec, too. The same proportion. There are many Francophones whose main language has become English because of the context. And over time, the mother tongue is lost. The phenomenon of assimilation is something we see outside Quebec. Good thing you want to act on that, but between you and me, the lady who spoke earlier talked about immigration. Well, to my knowledge, if the government of BC wants to have Francophone teachers, it should look for them internationally if it doesn't find any within its borders. And that will fulfill Mr. Parent's objective. He wants an increase in Francophone immigration. The money is there. They can go and get them in countries like Gabon or Morocco or Switzerland or Belgium or France. There are certainly people who'd be very happy with some accommodation to come and teach French anywhere in the world. That includes British Columbia, of course, Mr. Vice. Thank you very much. Mr. Parent, can you add anything to that? Absolutely. There is a growing appetite, which has been measured, for French language programs in minority communities, be it French immersion programs. That's been measured for many years, and that testifies to the appetite not only to understand the Canadian reality and living in both official languages, but it's also a job opportunity for young people who learn French and who increase the number of opportunities when it comes to the job market. So in order to build the economy of the nation, we must stimulate that appetite for teaching French, because it can then create opportunities for its beneficiaries. So that's an investment that is desirable and desired by Canadians, and that's value added for the government, specifically when it comes to immigrants who can teach. Thank you. You mentioned earlier that in situations like federal airports or other institution in BC right now, I try to speak with someone in the airport at Service Canada or someone like that. It's almost impossible to get French language service. So how could we improve the level of French of these workers in these federal institutions? Mr. Vice, that's a good question. I'm sorry. Very good question. But now we have to go on to our next colleague. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank our guests for having taken the time to come here to talk to us. Mr. Parent, I'd like to ask you about C-13, which forces the immigration minister to have a Francophone immigration policy with indicators, markers, and targets. What would the impact be on the demographics of the French population and the vitality of French overall in our country? Well, if there are better metrics, better outcome measurements to look at Francophone immigration, that would allow organizations and institutions that work in that sector to have a better picture of the evolution of Francophone immigration in this country. That would allow us to have a more in-depth follow-up. Lately, I had the opportunity to talk to researchers like Deschênes-Thériault, who cooperated in the Official Language Commissioner's examination of the immigration target of 4.4% in minority communities. That's the kind of data that would allow us to have prediction models and have better follow-up with IRCC. Some data was available in 2003, 2008, 2019, 2021, but there are gaps there when it comes to accessibility of data on immigration, particularly in certain cases. So having accountability and specific metrics and objectives would allow us to have more regular follow-up year after year and see how we could restore immigration in minority communities and have a target for the next years. Thank you for that answer. Your organization is also asking for an immigration program that is not mixed as a solution to get qualified Francophones. Could you tell us a little more about how this could be achieved and how you see this exactly? Yes, of course. We have to look at this research project that was pointed out by MP Ashton earlier about labor needs for minority language communities. We see these needs in some communities. We're talking about thousands of jobs that are vacant in various communities. If such a program could enhance economic immigration and allow us to fulfill needs on the ground, that wouldn't be easy, of course. It's hard to match up people with jobs. You have to have a study to look at the needs within communities or municipalities, but it would have a direct effect on the labor force. If we could have a custom-made program to meet needs and respond specifically to the difficulties experienced from coast to coast to coast, that would be great. You agree that there are many methods we could use to have that approach and increase Francophone immigration outside Quebec. That's a good approach that will strengthen communities that are linguistic minorities so that they can have that labor force and have that harmony of the francophonie across Canada. Yes, exactly. It would allow us to have a targeted approach that directly responds to the needs of communities, defined by these communities themselves, for them. There's that whole aspect that has to be taken into consideration in the equation, a distinct program that meets the needs on the ground and the evolution of the situation, of course, the evolution of the representation of Francophones in the country. According to the latest statistics, we know that French is on the decline proportionally in these communities, but if we look at absolute numbers, the number of Francophones has increased a bit. So we have to understand those realities and see specifically, let's say in Northern Ontario or the Prairies, how could this program be matched up to the needs, which may be different from those in Acadia or Southern Ontario. I'm sorry. Thank you, Ms. Gayabaga. Thank you very much. We're very disciplined. Everybody has to have a turn. So let's go on to Mario Beaulieu for 2 minutes and a half. You have the floor. Thank you. Mr. Perrault, I'd ask you a question on the fact that under the first official language criterion, the federal government tries to make sure that 33% of immigrants in Quebec get service across the country. Isn't this an effort to make Francophones a minority in Quebec? I would say that it's the vision. You know, I think as long as the federal government doesn't have a territorial approach for Quebec and applies to Quebec what it gives to Francophones outside Quebec, between you and me, that's asymmetry. But we know full well that this situation is not symmetrical. Quebec in North America and Canada is in a special situation. If there was a real concern in Canada to see Quebec and the North American francophonie develop in what Quebec can contribute, the federal government has to stop with this approach. We do in Quebec what we do outside Quebec. No, it can't work that way. 30% of students in McGill University, 50% of McGill students are non-Anglophones. That's a whole pool of recruitment for Francophones. And the federal government is giving millions of dollars to organizations in Quebec to promote English. They need students in their CEGEPs. They need students in their universities. Where do they go get them? Through the bilingualization program, they have a ready-made clientele. Let's be honest here. The trick, that disequilibrium, this manipulation, that's a strong word, but let's admit it. That vision is the cause of the decline of the francophonie in Quebec, of the French language. When you give organizations that promote English money, when the federal government gives these Quebec organizations money, what do you think they do? Thank you. Thank you. They need it. Mr. Perrault? Mr. Perrault, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I cheated, and I'm proud. Now, 2.5 minutes. Miss Ashton, you have the floor. Thank you very much. My question is for Mr. Parent. We know your organization helps immigrants before they get here. You pointed out that your service is not used in the 2019 call for tender. You said you work in French Africa, where the government systematically refuses immigrants. Can you tell us, in light of your past experience, what efforts the federal government makes in French Africa for people who want to come to Canada? What should the government do to stop being an obstacle to those efforts? Well, it's very simple. They should increase pre-departure services, especially the inclusion and the economic dimension in the equation. If we want to get greater presence in Francophone Africa and attract more Francophones from abroad to Canada, we have to strengthen these pre-departure programs. We were involved before I came to the organization, but unfortunately that service was cut off for us. So there were tangible results on the ground, and we hope that eventually this can be restored. Economic immigration plays a much more preponderant role in our society. We have to have specific institutions to fulfill those needs on the ground. There are 12 organizations across the country that represent each of the provinces and territories in minority situations, and they were well adapted to this kind of initiative. Therefore, we hope that in the renewal of the PALO or in C13, we could play a greater role internationally in order to enhance and increase the attractiveness of these communities. 10 seconds, Ms. Ashton.
I'd just like to thank you, and I'm sorry that your services were underfunded. Of course, the labor shortage affects everybody, even outside of Quebec, and we have to act. Before suspending the meeting, thank you so much, dear friends, for having shared your comments with a lot of passion. It was very interesting. If you think that there is some information that you were unable to communicate to us, please send it to our clerk, and she will send it to the members of this committee. Thank you very much. We are suspending.
OK, la séance reprend son cours. Donc, pour le deuxième...
We are resuming. For the second panel, we are inviting Mr. Alain Laberge and Société de Santé en Français and its President Antoine Desilets. So you each have 5 minutes, after which we will go to the question period, so 5 minutes maximum. Alain Laberge first for the Franco-Manitoban French Division. Thank you. I am Alain Laberge, Director General of the Division Scolaire de Franco-Manitobaine, a school division that has close to 6,000 students and is located on treaties 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, as well as on the homeland of Louis Riel and the Red River Métis. I would like to thank the House of Commons Official Languages Committee for allowing me to appear this morning. Undertaking the modernization of the Official Languages Act is no small task, but after all these years, it was necessary. I'm also grateful for the opportunity to share our school division's perspective on the proposed amendments. Before I share our comments on a number of the more specific amendments to the bill, I would like to share some thoughts with you based on our reading of this document. We all know that education is a provincial jurisdiction, but let's pause for a moment to consider why we cannot or should not dissociate this bill from what we call the world of education. More specifically, education in a minority setting. Having swum in it for more than 30 years, sometimes against the current, I believe it is important, even imperative, to share that education in a minority setting is much more than the learning of knowledge. It is rather a concept or a universe that is rooted in our guts and includes the language and all its beautiful accents from all over the world. The inclusion that reflects who we are and brings us together. The culture that allows us to express ourselves creatively, identity building, and so on. Education in a minority setting is our heritage of yesterday and our wealth of tomorrow, for are we not learners from the cradle to the grave? It would be easy to talk about health, education, and the economy under the sole umbrella of this department, but why not use this new law to create a link between these different sectors so that our communities in minority settings can develop more so? In this regard, we welcome the 10th paragraph of the preamble, but more specifically these two statements, recognizing the importance of supporting sectors that are essential to the vitality of the English and French linguistic minorities, and recognize the importance of providing every person in Canada with the opportunity to learn a second official language. As you can see, education is deliberately plural. In order for this recommendation to become a reality, it will be important to ensure that significant and ongoing investments are made and that Francization programs are offered in both urban and rural areas. Thank you for allowing me to share with you some of the minor pitfalls of education in a minority setting. And let me share with you the main points of our discussions on the latest amendments to the Official Languages Act. We believe it is important to emphasize the importance of the following changes in the 7th and 8th paragraphs of the preamble: that the Government of Canada is committed to enhancing the vitality of the English and French linguistic minority communities and supporting and assisting their development in light of their unique and diverse character and their historical and cultural contributions to Canadian society. This addition truly bridges our two solitudes, but if I may say so, it is also rather a bridge between our various solitudes, for let us not forget that Canada of today and tomorrow must take into consideration all our new compatriots who bring with them in their suitcases their own history, to which our own will be mixed. We believe it is important to emphasize the importance of the present elements as well as the modifications in the 10th paragraph. Recognize the importance of supporting sectors that are essential to the development of the English and French minorities. Recognize the importance of providing every person in Canada with the opportunity to learn a second official language. That the Constitution grants every person the right to use English or French in the debates of the House of Legislature of Quebec, of the National Assembly of Quebec, and the National Assemblies of Manitoba, and the right to use English or French in all matters before the courts of those provinces and in all proceedings arising therefrom. To support and assist in the development of English and French linguistic minority communities in order to protect them. To advance the quality of status and use of English and French within Canadian society, taking into account the fact that French is a minority situation in Canada and North America due to the predominant use of French. Just like the Gaulois, the Gauls, people who made the choice to live in French knowing that it would not be no cakewalk. Allow me to use the allegory of a flower that grows in the desert despite various conditions. Here are 3 elements from the definitions and interpretations section. Language rights must be interpreted in a broad and liberal manner according to their purpose. They must be interpreted in terms of their remedial nature. Substantive equality is the standard for these rights. In our view, we have a duty to remember the thousands of Francophones across the country that have been forced against their will to attend Anglophone schools, transmitting their language clandestinely, hiding their books to avoid the ire of the majority. We have a duty to remember that it is the rightful claimants who, despite their goodwill, have lost their privilege of seeing their children educated in French. Mr. Laberge, your time is up. I will give the floor to Antoine Desilets for Société Santé Français for 5 minutes. Thank you to the chair and members of the committee. It's a pleasure for me to be here. First, I want to recognize that the lens that Société Santé Français is on is traditional unceded territory. I would like to give you some statistics from Léger Marketing from 2020 about the perception of immigrants on their access to healthcare. A third of people who were surveyed said that they had no access to services in French. 19% mentioned that there was an improvement in the last 10 years of access. 40% said it was the same, and 15% said that it was worse than before, and the rest said they had no opinion. The obstacles with regards to access, so lack of human resources, longer wait times in hospitals, or lack of information in French. Mr. Desilets, we're asking you to speak a little bit slowly to allow the interpreter to work. I will try to go a bit slowly. I'm in front of a lot of committees lately. A few words on our organization. We are a national organization supported by Health Canada. We celebrated 20 years this year. We seek to improve healthcare services, and we wish to work in every province. We have 16 members, and they are connected to different essential partners, governments, healthcare establishments, professionals, training institutions, or even communities. Our work is to make them understand the concerns of the Francophone communities and what they can do, and the development of skills. And that will allow us to improve policy. We receive our funds from the federal government, so we cannot act independently. What we are doing is really a David and Goliath situation. In 2021, $300 billion were spent, but with regards to support of official languages, we're talking about $40 million. For professional training as well. Every $500 that is spent in Canada, only 1 cent goes towards the official languages. Here are my 2 suggestions for C13. First, I'd like to mention that we are part of the Acadian Federation, Francophone Federation, and we support all of their suggestions. For example, the creation of a central agency. Here are my 2 suggestions with regards to health. Here are certain conditions. For example, the data collection is not very clear. We don't have a clear idea of what the state of the Francophone community's health is like vis-a-vis the dominant communities. Second condition could be that there should be services offered according to the government's priorities. The second major suggestion is to distinguish what is under federal, provincial jurisdiction. Thank you, Mr. Desilets. You can elaborate later. First round of questions with 6 minutes. Our first Vice Chair, Joël Godin, 6 minutes. Thank you. Thank you for participating. And as I've mentioned to the previous panel, you help us improve. Here are my questions for both organizations. In your introductions, you noted what the situation is like, and we obviously have a lot of work ahead of us in order to improve the position of French, which is one of the official languages of Canada. Now, how do we achieve this? We're here to improve the bill that is here in front of us, the Modernization of Official Languages Act, Bill C-13. Here is my question. How can we implement tools and laws that would allow us to intervene in different provinces and territories? So how do we improve the bill so that we talk about the clauses, the linguistic clauses? According to you, what would be the best amendment so that the linguistic clauses be efficient? Mr. Laberge first, and then Mr. Desilets. Thank you for this very relevant question. For Franco-Manitobans, the government can play a very big role with regards to bilingualism. The tools that would be essential for us would allow immigrants to have Francisization courses, not just in the city, but also in rural areas. We have to hold their hands sometimes. They come from countries like Africa, Europe, Asia. Excuse me, Mr. Laberge, I'll just stop you right now. My question is very specific. Concerning the linguistic clauses, which ones do you think would be the best clauses that we could have in C-13 to have a proper result?
One we said is to encourage the equality of French and English in society. As long as we don't have that, schools will be there just to learn a language that's never used. So we'd have places in Canada where it's absolutely pointless. Mr. Desilets? Thank you for the question. In the bill, we have the recognition of provincial jurisdiction in the Constitution, but we could add the spending power increased for the federal government. For example, the collection of probative data. If $45 billion is sent to the provinces every year, that'll probably increase in coming years. One has the right to ask for something in return at the federal level when it comes to healthy second language. To have a better idea, these transfers in healthcare should narrow the deficiency between French and English. Thank you, Mr. Desilets. I'll test an amendment I've been thinking about that I intend to table for linguistic clauses. One has to understand that there are jurisdictions that are provincial and territorial, and others are federal. I know that Mr. Desilets deals with that situation daily. Now, what I'd like to understand is if we table an amendment to C13 regarding language clauses, where it says you have federal, provincial, territorial agreements for infrastructure, for any investment, any bilateral agreement. Now, we add an envelope dedicated for the provinces and territories that are interested in action, concrete action, for the minorities. Would that be realistic and effective? Mr. Laberge. Absolutely. I love your proposal. There have to be transparency when the money arrives in the provinces. As you noted, there are two systems. Education's provincial. We'd like to know whether that dedicated money will be in our coffers so that we can move things forward, not have some kind of blockage by the province. We could build new schools in rural areas, offer better transportation, more teachers. You're right. You're right. I think that there's an obligation for results, and that has to be provided for in the language clause. Mr. Desilets, I'd like to hear you about my proposal. A dedicated envelope for provinces that are prepared to take action would be a good amendment, but one mustn't deny that it's not all provinces that want to do this. We need to continue to put objectives on the table, good expectations. Thank you, Mr. Desilets. I have other questions, but the chairman, you have 15 seconds. Well, I just want to say, if you have other wording to reinforce the bill and the amendment, I would like you to send them to us in writing if you don't have time to answer us today. Thank you, Mr. Godin. The next question will be from Patricia Latanzio for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the witnesses for taking the time to help us develop Bill C-13. My first question would be for Mr. Laberge. Mr. Laberge, I'm very pleased to see you and have a representation from the educational field. I'd like to share with you that I was a school commissioner on an English school board, in the biggest one in Quebec. So I'm very pleased to see you among us. So perhaps you can give us some ideas for solutions that we could think about, how to preserve the school environment, even though it's provincial. But as you said very well in your speech, this is more than just a building. It's a community. It's a question of inclusion and culture and who we are. So let's go a little further in order to help you. In addition to increasing the number of French teachers in your schools, do you see any other solutions or any other requests for funding that could improve that presence and the maintenance of French in Manitoba? Thank you very much. Ms. Latanzio, I do remember you. I was Director General of Sorel-Tracy School Board in another life. I remember you very well. So how can we go further? Well, you mentioned teachers. That's one thing. When you have minority community education, we forget that there's great expenses for books and software and transportation just to have a school in your community. Some kids are on the bus an hour and a half morning and night. You have to be dedicated to French to do that. But there are not enough schools. We need a larger number of buildings. We have to leave parents a choice, and people in Flin Flon, Thompson, Manitoba, who are entitled but lost that right to have French education. We have to allow Article 23 to be seen in its entirety. As you know, we received the new census now that describes the data that was collected, more specifically on those who are entitled. Could you describe the results of that research or those statistics that were collected. The first statistics are supposed to come out in November with what we call the entitled families. So the census was broadened to allow families to have 2 first languages, which is great, but I didn't get that data yet. In the last data we got in September and August, we saw that there was an increase, and that was mentioned by Mr. Parent in your first panel. There is a substantial increase of students who want to learn French. The problem is that here in Manitoba, if you want to be in an immersion school, and I know I'm talking about the competition here, there's no school outside Winnipeg that offers this service. So there's a part of the population that'll never have the opportunity to get this education or speak French. Clause 23 in the new census will allow us to expand that pool, but we have to fight with the ministry all the time. The Anglophones will say Transcona increase. I want a new school. I'll say Transcona increased in French, and they'll say how many families. So I don't have that data, and that data will be essential. My next question is for Mr. Desilets. Mr. Desilets, you talked about a survey that was conducted on healthcare. I wanted to ask you, that pool of data was included how many people? How many people received the survey, and during what period? Was it before or during the pandemic, post-pandemic? Thank you for that question. In terms of methodology, I don't have the number of responders. It's a Léger Marketing survey, a well-known firm. It was done. It came out in early 2020, so it was pre-pandemic. So we don't have a clear idea of the impact of the pandemic on this. But the Société Santé en Français saw an impact on the population in general, but even more so for the minority communities because of a lack of services. But the figures I have are pre-pandemic. Okay, so having said that, do you feel that all communications must be done, be it in an urgent or non-urgent situation? It has to be in both official languages. To my mind, it's absolutely essential. If it's urgent, we have 2 official languages, but we're sending out the message that French is a secondary language. I don't think that's a good message to have out there. Now, with regard to the proposals you put forward, I wanted to ask you, since you made a nuance between public health and health care, how is this happening between the 2 services? Well, yes, I'd be pleased to discuss it. Go ahead. 15 seconds. Essentially, 75%. It's essentially about development of services at the federal government. This is a situation on which we have indirect influence. We have to give the tools to the provinces to do this work. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. We can get back to that later, Mr. Desilets. Mr. Barriot-Beaulieu, the second vice chair of the committee, you have 6 minutes. Thank you. My first question is about schools. I read that about 50% of children of Francophone parents don't have access to any kind of French school. In your opinion, does that reflect reality? Because Francophones are scattered over a huge territory? That's an excellent point. I worked in BC for 15 years. Quebecers got together there in Maillerville. At one point, new arrivals exploded. So you ended up Francophones scattered all over the place. What that means is it dilutes the product, and that's why we need more schools. The other thing is new arrivals often come here with financial challenges. They end up in the same sector. And once again, our schools are full to cracking. And that's a bad message for these new arrivals. You say, we're a bilingual country, but you'll never work in French in Manitoba. So what do those people do for their own survival? They register their kids in English school. I'm a product that speaks French very well. My child is a child who went to French school. She's already bilingual. So these are all elements that have to be taken into consideration. But I'd say you're right, Mr. Beaulieu. Maybe 50% or more are not in French school right now. And what we see in C13, or what was announced in the white paper as well, is there's a desire to increase funding for immersion schools, but there's nothing about increasing funding for French schools, for Francophones. Many stakeholders told me that in immersion schools, yes, it gives you some minimum learning of French, but often it favors assimilation of young Francophones. So don't you think we should be increasing funding by and for Francophones? Yes, of course, 100% correct. I think this is also an issue of changing the culture. If there are immersion schools but no Francophone life outside the school, it kills the language. A child in immersion may learn French, but plays soccer with his friends in English at 4 o'clock, goes to church in English, what have you. So that's a sword in the water, really. If immersion has more money, that's one thing, but the structure around them has to be Francophone too. And Francophone schools have to have dedicated budgets, as was put forward earlier, in order to favor immigration. We'd like to recruit people from Africa, but we can't offer them jobs or anything in French. So, you know, there's a spanner in the works here. The biggest part of the funding goes to immersion schools. So wouldn't it be a good thing for immersion schools to be managed by Francophones? Well, that's a highly politicized issue. As an administrator, I can tell you that. If you tell me tomorrow that the Franco-Manitobans are going to administer immersion schools, I'll do it. Is there another way of doing it? We'll do it. We'd still have a problem getting teachers at the end of the road. If we're a bilingual country, we have to walk the talk. We have to be able to get French language services everywhere. It's impossible to go to St. Boniface Hospital and be served in French. So where's the logic here? Why should children and new arrivals learn French if there's absolutely no attachment to this? That's exactly it. And if we look at Quebec, the legislation on health and social services guarantees English services for anyone Anglophone. That means not necessarily people who have English as a mother tongue, just anybody who asks for it. There are access services. There are hospitals with status 29.1. They hire Anglophones. There are many. So the access plans are not subject to a clause about number of justified demographics. It's just on demand. I think there should be some kind of change here. Perhaps the gentleman who talks about health care should answer this. Mr. Desilets, go ahead. Yes, thank you. Should it be applied? Well, these questions of designation are essentials. We have to know your population. Data is extremely important. We have no clear information about what services Francophones use, where they use them, are there different needs in healthcare. All is based on good data, and that doesn't exist right now. When we look at this, shouldn't we have a much stronger Bill C-13 that would reverse that tendency to assimilate Francophones outside Quebec? Well, I think it's important to use this opportunity in C-13 to clarify what the objectives are. Do we need a stronger bill that will have a better spin-off? I support that because we have an objective for Francophones. We don't want language to be a problem in healthcare. We want everybody to be well served. 20 seconds. Well, okay. I'll give my time to someone else. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. We'll finish this 6-minute round with Ms. Ashton from Manitoba. You have the floor. Thank you very much, and thank you to our witnesses. That's very special for me to hear the Manitoba Association here. I know the challenges that I experienced personally trying to bring my kids to daycare in French here in Thompson. and there's a linkage with the labor shortage for early childhood education. The committee knows that I'm very happy that your organization welcomed my children into kindergarten. If you hear them around me, as you know, schools are closed today because of a professional development day, so they're here with me. It's working well. We practice French, even though schools closed today. I just want to tell you that I thank you for your testimony and the clear message you've communicated, both Mr. Laberge and Desilets, about what we can do right now at this historic point to improve Bill C-13, to put an end to the decline of French everywhere, including in our communities like here in Manitoba. My first question, Monsieur Laberge, I'm addressing you. We heard Jean-François Parent from an association, RDEE, that published a report about the lack of Francophone labor in many areas, including education. He told us that the situation is comparable in Saskatchewan, too. Could you describe how that report applies in our province of Manitoba? Well, it's crucial. This is a vital issue. You're talking about Thompson, a northern community that wants to grow. In order for it to flourish in French, we have to work twice as hard. At some point, we have to favor not only immigration to work here, to have a greater population, but to have retention. There's no point having new educators who come for 2 years and leave for Winnipeg afterwards. Money has to be put in place to ensure a minimum. If you're a parent who only has one daycare in a town like Thompson, a French language daycare, and you're 10, 15 kilometers away, and there's a daycare in English at the corner, you can't fight that kind of system. You have to have fairness. That is services across the province to help our families. Yes, exactly. We are familiar with that reality. I'd also like to ask you, based on your experience, even in BC, we recognize this labor shortage and tried to support the daycare and bring in people from abroad. We have many federal obstacles. There's a lack of priority given to recruitment of Francophone educational professionals, especially for early childhood education. Do you think that given this bill, the government could do much more to attract educators that are Francophone, including early childhood educators from abroad? I think that education is the poor cousin of the federal government because it's a matter of provincial jurisdiction. But I think there's an understanding of investing in this and retaining those people, but you have to go get these people. You have to attract them and give them a feeling of wanting to stay.
In education in all sectors, there is a lack. Maybe it's because it's considered, it's because it's not considered an economy or an investment. It really is actually a motor, and I think that would be the same everywhere. Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Desilets. The same report by RDE talks about the loss of qualified workers. What are the impacts of the failure on immigration? There is a labor shortage across the healthcare sector in Canada. It impacts Francophones more so because every Francophone healthcare worker can also give offer their services in English as well, so they are bilingual. So they can work in Anglophone, Francophone, or bilingual areas. Francophone immigration, the recognition of foreign diplomas, integration of foreign workers, these are all solutions. Of course, people come here thinking that they will work in French, but they are pushed into a sector where it's Anglophone. And of course, there are situations that impact how we can train people. So, for example, training for nurses, there's an American test in many provinces that is used right now that makes it more difficult for Francophones. 93%. There was a approval for things improved when the test was changed. 93% of Francophones were able to pass the test once it was changed. We will now go on to Mr. Dalton, who begged us to be a part of this committee. It's my pleasure to be here again today. I am an MP from British Columbia, just like my colleague, Mr. Viss. I can't underestimate the importance of French in our history, especially, of course, across the country. The Fraser River, on the other side of it, the first capital was Fort Langley. And it really is a part of who we are. We don't want to see French, the number of Francophone speakers diminish in French in our province or across Canada. So thank you for the efforts that you make. French was more present in churches, rural communities, in agricultural communities. Now it's much more urban. So it really is a struggle to maintain and preserve French. Mr. Laberge, you are with the Franco-Manitoban French Francophone division. And so what you're doing for the dissemination of French in schools is very important, but we have to improve that. Can you explain to us the following? How does the alienation process of real estate work? So we're talking about surplus of real estate buildings. And can you tell us more about the process and what is working and what isn't working? If I may, I was a principal in Chilliwack, so I do know the Fraser River very well. When we talk about what will work well or not, you talked about rural areas, and it's important to talk about, but with regards to a building, alienation, as you said, well, Francophones and Indigenous people should usually have priority on a building that is vacant. This process is actually a lot more complex than one would think. In Manitoba, we would see buildings that were for sale that had already that were already taken over by a real estate agent, and the Indigenous communities had not been consulted. We are losing out on opportunities to purchase new buildings. That is something that can help maintain buildings in the community. What amount of money goes towards these Francophones? That's a good question. We don't have all the numbers. A part of it is administered or dedicated to manage the Francophone Education Bureau, as we call it. They take care of French education and also immersion. Maybe a fifth of our budget comes from the federal government. So $24 to $25 million comes from the federal government, but the question is always what is the full amount that we each received? It's always very complicated and complex to answer that. I'm not saying we can't, but we aren't, filling out forms all day. So with British Columbia, we know that people are coming, but we don't know where they're going. Or rather, we know that the funds are coming in, but we don't know where they go. With immigration, can we do better? What can we improve for them? Especially for those who are in a minority situation. What can we improve in 10 seconds? Is it for me? Well, we have to greet them properly, recognize their diplomas. We have to support them on over 4 or 5 years for the time. That's the time it would take for these families to settle. Other provinces, we ask them for permits and so on. Thank you, Mr. Laberge. You'll be able to elaborate. Maybe I'll go like the other witness and I'll just go overtime. No, I do prefer that you respect the time. Mr. Iacono, 5 minutes. Thank you. And thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Desilets, what demands do you have? What do you think must absolutely be included in C-13? For us, it's the linguistic clauses. It's not just a question of following the money. Of course, the management by the central agency seems essential to us. We have a program that is managed not by Canadian heritage, and sometimes there's a disalignment with regards to the educators. A central agency would be very important. Official languages. With regards to official languages, there's a lot of sectors are impacted, but not young people. For Francophone communities and Acadian communities in minority situations, what are the principal issues of C-13? Does it look like the answer that you gave us, or are there comments that you want to add? The question is complex because health is very important. Every province has its own challenges, and I think we need to look at what we can do to act, similar to my previous answer. You talked about data collection and collecting missing data. Can you tell us more about that? What kind of information should we be collecting? Why? And what for? What's the scope? 2 types of data. The capacity of systems with regards. The second is for the needs of healthcare services. We know that minority status people have, there's some specificities. On the healthcare card, stating the language that is needed, that would actually be very helpful, for example. And one last one. Who should take on this task? Well, with the data collection, we do it directly with the provinces and territories. We provide them with the necessary tools. And, of course, the programs that we implement federally would be helpful. Mr. Laberge, you spoke about the need for investment to increase the amount of French teachers or Francophone teachers. Is this something that should be included in C13? How can we facilitate that investment? It's quite complex because part of that has to do with immigration, and that is why I'm asking the question. I'd like for us to, be on the same page. We don't want to stick our noses in too much because we're told sometimes to back off. But what do you think? Well, C13 is a hyphen. Every province has a college that authorizes in British Columbia. We have two great universities with a very average French program. So where do we go get our people? In Ottawa and Moncton. And when you go to Moncton, the Moncton president tells me, stop it, you're taking our people. And then there needs to be some sort of integration between immigration and education. I think the word hyphen is a good one. Mr. Desilets, would you like to add anything? There is a power dynamic. Every $500 that is spent in Canada, 1 cent is for official languages. We need more support to diminish the inequalities. Mr. Chair, how many seconds? 30 seconds. Thank you very much. And thank you to our witnesses. So let's continue with Mario Beaulieu for 2.5 minutes. Do I not get 30 seconds more? No, I don't want to waste my time. Mr. Beaulieu, I'm being generous towards you today. Mr. Laberge, with regards to the schools, I spoke yesterday with Monsieur Lepage from Saskatchewan. He said that African immigrants who go to a French school, they see or they realize after about a year that there are almost no services in French. They see that that Canada is not a bilingual country outside of Quebec, and so they change their minds and they go to English schools. There's a rate of assimilation that is quite high with Francophone immigrants. Even Quebecers go abroad or leave the province. What can we do or change in C13? Well, the welcoming structure is important because when they come here and then after a few months they see that they're not getting anything, well, that's disappointing. We have people that go to their houses and explain to them what is education in Canada, how to learn English, for example, and we try to keep this pool and this community together. There needs to be more federal willingness to ensure that there are services offered in both languages everywhere. For Mr. Desilets, in 2019, I made a complaint. There was a text message service, support service that was only offered in English. I spoke about it directly to Health Canada when they came here as a witness. We corrected that situation. Do you think that this kind of situation is frequent with regards to the federal governor and services? In 10 seconds, I think we have I think there's a lot of good intentions, but a lot of things are translated from English, and we can see that there have been changes since the pandemic, but we have to be very vigilant. We'll end with Manitoba. Ms. Ashton, 2.5 minutes. Thank you. My question is one I've asked during the other panel, permanent resident permanent residents that arrived, data we collected in 2019 on permanent residents demonstrates that they are not from the top 10 countries of immigration. What can the federal government do to help you with the labor shortage and provide the essential services that are that the Francophone communities deserved? Mr. Laberge first, and then Mr. Desilets. Well, these services are essential and vital, and so if they don't, if consular services don't exist, there are people who will literally not go to those countries. So Congo, Rwanda, that is a huge change for those immigrants, and we have to, hold their hand and accompany them. So consular services must be omnipresent, but also, over time, they need more support. I think we just need more labor for health care. But I think that their ability to provide that labor is not recognized. So recognizing diplomas is very important, but also ensuring that Francophone areas are actually Francophone. 98% of Canadians use health services, and so that's everyone. They do that in any given year. And so we need to make sure that we reach our goals. And just quickly, as a last question, we heard a lot from the FCFA and so on. The importance of linguistic clauses through this bill that will help make sure that the services are a priority for Francophones. Do you think that this is that linguistic clauses are essential? That is an excellent question, but your time is up. And so, to our witnesses, if you think that you needed more time and you have some more thoughts, please send us any additional information in written format through our clerk, and she will share that information with all of our members. And so thank you very much. And thank you for making suggestions for Bill C-13, and it will definitely help our committee prepare a better report. Before adjourning, there seems to be some talk about next Tuesday. We want the second hour to be dedicated to a specific issue. Did I understand that correctly? Are you in agreement, those who are attending virtually? Great. So I will confirm second hour next Tuesday will be dedicated to committee business. End of meeting.